Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all again. It seems like it's been a while since we've been together, and people have been scattered and traveling, but we are delighted, and I am super excited to hear from Etsuko, especially as someone who does work in the energy humanities. The second that Lily mentioned, the kind of work that you do, Etsuko, I was over the moon. So I will just offer a quick introduction to our guest, and then we can enjoy the talk. So Dr. Etsuko Kinafuchi, she's professor of communication studies at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, where she's also affiliated faculty with the Department of Geography, Environment, or Program in Geography, Environment, and Sustainability. Her research examines discourses of the relationships among culture, identity, and the environment from eco-justice perspectives, and aims to support the creation of a life-affirming world, a project that we are certainly all on board with. And she's also the author of the still pretty new book, Competing Discourses on Japan's Nuclear Power, Pro-Nuclear versus Anti-Nuclear Activism, which came out with Routledge in 2022. And I love this work that she's doing that we could probably all learn a lot from, because it's the kind of stuff that we're trying to build upon at UNCG. She chairs the Sustainability Council, and she previously served as the Academic Sustainability Coordinator. Beyond that, she serves on the boards of directors of the International Environmental Communication Association and the North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition. She is also on the advisory council of the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, an organization that we have, a handful of us have been learning quite a bit about in the last year or so. And her talk has the amazing title, Renewable for Whom? Woody Biomass and Its Shadow Places. Welcome, Dr. Kinafuchi. We're delighted to have you here. And your mic is off. Oh, it's off. It's still off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And this sounds like an amazing group of faculty, staff, students, alumni, and we don't have something like what you have here in KSOU. So that could be something that I can suggest on my campus too. But I would like to go ahead and start with my presentation. I have been always interested in energy issues. So that's why I did nuclear power, and now with this woody biomass, because it's so we are sort of ground zero in North Carolina on this issue. So I'm very interested in that. Just, I don't know how much you know about woody biomass, but the woody biomass, of course, comes from trees, and trees are burned to produce fuel. And at the industrial level, wood is grinded and turned into pellets, like those you see on the cover slide. Woody biomass has been promoted as renewable energy by the biomass industry, as well as many governments across the globe, but it comes with many dire consequences that the industry does not want to talk about. So today I want to talk about the industry's discourse as well as its consequences. And I'd like to begin very briefly with the growth of woody biomass energy. And this is something I took out of a Canadian Biomass magazine website. So you can see the exponential growth of woody biomass from 2010 to we are right here. This was published in 2021, so the projection could be a little bit off, but nonetheless, you could see the growth of this industry. And as you can see, the majority of the market for wood pellets is in the UK and the rest of Europe. And then we have a growing market in Asia, especially Japan and South Korea. So in the early 2000s, European countries adopted woody biomass as renewable energy. And in 2009, European Union set a goal to achieve 20% renewable energy by 2020 and began to subsidize woody biomass industry. And when the Paris Agreement came out in 2015, that required every country to set greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And the EU substantially increased the share of woody biomass energy. According to Dogwood Alliance, that's a North Carolina-based forest conservation organization, the UK energy company Drax received nearly $1 billion in subsidies in 2019 to buy wood pellets. So the question is, where do those wood pellets come from? Well, mostly the ones that are going into European market and increasingly to Japan, they're coming from southeastern United States. And the industry is using, they are calling this renewable energy and sustainable energy using the IPCC's carbon accounting loophole, because of in terms of accounting for carbon emissions, IPCC has determined that when it comes to forest, the accounting should be done at the time of the harvest, not at the smoke stop. So so it's being cut down, and that creates carbons because you have a carbon sinks that are going up smoke. But then when the pellets are burned, it creates, of course, greenhouse gases, but that's not being accounted because they determine that's going to be double counting. But that's a loophole because that doesn't make it doesn't add up. But that's the loophole that the industry is using. And the wood that becomes wood pellets, primarily coming from southeastern United States, where I live. And the biggest company, wood pellet company, is Enviva. And the company has 10 plants right now across the southeastern United States. I put the number there, but North Carolina is the largest supplier of wood pellets right now. We have 4 plants. So that's the situation. And in looking at the communication that's coming out of the industry, I'm loosely using ecolinguistics and the framing as the way to look at the discourse. Ecolinguistics considers the role of language in the life-sustaining interactions of humans with other humans, other organisms, and the physical environment. And so when you use ecolinguistics, you would have ecosophy that you will be using as a framework. And in my case, I am drawing, later on I'll talk about this, but I'm drawing from ecofeminism, indigenous epistemology, and environmental justice. So the unit of analysis is the kind of stories that communicators tell. So in my case, I'm primarily looking at, as a case study, Enviva's communication about wood pellets. So I'm using framing as the primary. There are different lenses you can use within ecolinguistics, but I'm using framing as the lens. So in the next few slides, I will look at the frames Enviva adopted to advance its image of sustainability. And then I will later on turn my attention to the stories that are left out of the frames. I want to begin with Enviva's homepage. And so if you look at this image and the words there, displace fossil fuels, grow more trees, fight climate change. This looks very much like an environmental organization's homepage, website. In accordance with this slogan, Enviva presents itself as a foremost sustainable leader that addresses climate change. Climate change heads on, really. In my analysis, Enviva uses three main frames to construct this image. One of which is the most prominent, is the 100% renewable and carbon neutral frame. And they put forth this frame by using a lot of presupposition of abundance of forests and abundance of trees. And so here is an example from one of their pages. It says the vast majority of the Southeast United States is forested, and every year harvest occurs on about 3% of forest land in the region. Simultaneously, the other 97% of the forest is in various stages of regrowth. In other words, in any year in the Southeast United States, for every acre that's harvested, 49 acres are going back. And so this type of image is communication is very prevalent across the company's communication. And so with these statistics, it looks really sustainable. But of course, there are a lot of contradictory data that the company is ignoring. For example, the Global Forest Watch, a program of the World Resources Institute, it monitors changes to global forests. It shows that in 20 years, from 2001 to 2021, North Carolina lost almost 2 million hectares, or 24% of tree cover. And the most deforested counties overlap with the areas from which Enviva acquired wood. And so there are other data like that that says otherwise, but that is not, of course, part of the company's framing. Another way to promote this frame is the use of intertextuality, where the company references the established organizations, government and international organizations, such as reference to IPCC, the European Union, International Energy Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture is a big supporter of the wood pellet industry. And so a lot of references being made. And the Sustainable Biomass Program, which is pretty much made up of the industry. So they have, I put an example here. They put out news flash, like Enviva welcomes RED 3 agreement and continued recognition of biomass as 100% renewable. This was coming out of the European Union earlier this year. So the European Union continues to see biomass as 100% renewable, and that's been very beneficial for the industry. Although there are some developments, such as in the Netherlands, for example, the country made a statement this year that they are not going to accept wood pellets that are harvested in an unsustainable way, meaning clear cut of natural forest. But so there are some changes like that, but in general, the European Union still supports biomass as renewable energy. And another way to establish legitimacy for the claim that it's 100% renewable is Enviva uses a lot of peer-reviewed articles and like this. And then the stresses the fact that these are peer-reviewed, rigorous studies that's all supporting biomass as the renewable. But it's been debated in a sense that yes, it can be renewable, it can be sustainable, but there are a lot of factors you have to think about that are being entirely ignored by the industry, and I'm going to talk some of that later. So the U.S. Industrial Pellet Association is another group that supports industry, of course, and they have the company published this claim to refute the dissenting voices. The director of this association stated that there is no published research that has been subjected to the rigor of independent peer review that supports these claims. Indeed, they are directly refuted by the weight of empirical scientific evidence. But there are, of course, many peer-reviewed and independent research that prove otherwise. And those studies have shown that regrowing forests, for example, first of all, takes decades. And we all know that. We don't have to be an ecologist or foresters to know that. Regrowing forests take decades and incur, in the meantime, substantial carbon debts. Replanted plantation forests are found to absorb much less carbon than the natural forests that they replace. And the physical composition of biomass is rich in carbon, but not in energy. So it results in greater near-term emissions than for fossil fuels and perpetual carbon debt. So studies have shown that, in fact, biomass emit much more CO2s than coals, for example. And additionally, whole tree harvesting means that the soils are compromised, and so nutrients leach, and then runoff happens, and soil erosions occur as a result. So all these consequences are not being considered, although those have been published in peer-reviewed journals as well. Another claim that they make continuously is that the industry only uses low-value wood. And so here is a quote for, as an example. We have a responsible sourcing practices that keep working forests thriving, healthy, and growing. We source from landowners who intend to return their land to forest and create a market for their low-value wood. And so the low-value wood, by this they mean the tops and limbs of trees, crooked or diseased trees, slash, understory, and thin tree lengths. So Enviva claims that it does not source from old growth natural forests, but that has been found to be completely false. So, for example, this was the statement from a whistleblower from that industry, and it was this was published in an interview by Justin Catanoso. He's the environmental journalist writing for Monga Bay. So this whistleblower said, "We take giant whole trees. We don't care where they come from. The notion of sustainably managed forest is nonsense. We can't get wood into the mills fast enough." So I just wanted to say that this is just one of many examples that stories that counter the industry's claims about sustainable practices. Another frame that they use is they emphasize that they are forest conservationists, and they do this in terms of the kind of language they use across their communication, the protecting the forest, protecting trees, protecting the communities, restoration, keeping the forest. These types of language is very prominent. And they also promote this framing of forest conservationists through showcasing a lot of partnerships that they have with conservation organizations and endorsement by political leaders. And also, to me, most importantly, the testimonials of landowners, that one of the things that makes it very difficult for the opponents of the wood pellet industries is that those forests are privately owned. And so that if the landowners say, sure, we will sell our trees to you, there is very little others can do. And the industry uses a lot of testimonials from landowners that they partner with. For example, this one is from the landowner in Florida. He says, if it weren't for the pellet plant, I would have never been able to cut those trees, sell those trees. They were sand pines that nobody wanted, but the pellet plant can cut those trees and develop their product from what I call a trash tree. The money I received from the cut, I was able to put toward replanting with this longleaf pine. So he is replanting, but this is complicated because sand pines, he defines sand pines as trash trees, but they are also important from an ecological point of view. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Another frame that the Enviva uses is that we build a community. We are a community-oriented organization. So, for example, economically, it's an easy sell because they bring some employment, especially in a rural area where jobs are necessary. But socially, they really work hard to build this image that we are community oriented. We are part of the community. So one of the examples I have here is that Girl Scouts. And those of us, we living in the States, we know the Girl Scouts is one of the most beloved organizations, social organizations. And they just entered a partnership earlier this year with the Girl Scouts of Greater Mississippi. And the company says that we really like to help those girls. The industry, the forest industry is very gender unbalanced, and we would like to help with STEM education for the girls and elevate the status of girls in general. So they define girls to be this minority that they are helping to lift up. Another example is the use of social media. Every time when some kind of a month, special months come up, they put out messages like this. You see, celebrate Pride, to emphasize that we are all for diversity and inclusion. So these are just some examples, but I want to move on to talk about, so these sound all great, it's 100% renewable, carbon neutral, the forest conservation and building communities. That it sounds like a really wonderful industry to have in your community. However, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, there are a lot of things that the industry as a whole and Enviva in particular in this case leaves out. so which I call shadow places. And I'm borrowing this from ecofeminist Val Plumwood. She explains shadow places as all those places that produce or are affected by the commodities you consume, places consumers don't know about, don't want to know about, and in a commodity regime, don't ever need to know about or take responsibility for. So there are a lot of shadow places in this industry. I also like to bring up that ecolinguist Aaron Stibb points out that erasure is intrinsic to discourse. And so these shadow places are erased parts of the discourse. And because all representations, of course, are necessarily partial, but what would you decide to erase or decide to exclude? That says as much about the discourse as what's included. So what's left out of NBIVA's framing? The preceding section, I already included some discussions of the conflicting information NBIVA has left out. In the next few slides, I'd like to pay attention to the spheres of life that are largely missing from NBIVA's framing of sustainability. So let's look at some of those shadow places. And one of which is these frontline communities. NBIVA is very proud, and they say this on their website. Our manufacturing facilities operate 24/7 to provide customers with reliable, renewable options to replace fossil fuels, which sounds all great. It's a productive company, reliable. But what this means is that for the communities around those manufacturing facilities, it's creating massive air pollution and massive noise pollution 24/7. So I have a couple of points here, a quote with lots of, the people wake up with lots of mucus in throat, coughing, burning eyes, and runny nose. This is not an isolated incident. The people who live around those facilities experience those health consequences. And with air pollution, one of the reasons why this is happening is that the state governments are not enforcing the Clean Air Act as they should. They have not been enforcing. And of course, the industry is not the one that will go and say, hey, we want to make sure that we comply with Clean Air Act. So it has been until the communities and the environmental organizations have started to point these things out, they largely fail to enforce this law. Noise pollution is also very significant. They have the companies have the 18-wheelers carrying logs in and out 24/7, and people who live near those facilities, it's like an earthquake happening all the time. So when there were a lot of protests that's been happening, but the company NBIVA primarily responds to those protests by saying that they are in compliance with the state requirements. Another type of shadow place, in addition to the frontline communities, is the whole ecological dimension of the area. In 2016, the North American coastal plain The green part that you see was recognized as the world's 36th biodiversity hotspot. In order to be designated as the hotspot, the region must have at least 1,500 vascular plants as endemic and have lost 70% of its original natural vegetation. So, and this is very important because the only 2.5% of Earth's land surface biodiversity hotspots, but they are, so it's only 2.5% of Earth's land surface, but they're home to 44% of the world's plants and 35% of land vertebrates. So biodiversity hotspots are extremely important from a biodiversity perspective. And this North American coastal plain has over 1,800 plants and 51 birds, 114 mammals that are endemic to the areas. So I put some of the pictures there. The red wolf, right now, red wolves are probably the most endangered animal in the United States. In the wild, the last time I checked last week, they only counted 15 of them in the wild, and they all live in the northeastern part of North Carolina, Albemarle Peninsula. That's the only known habitat for wild red wolves, and that's within this in this coastal plain. Of course, salamanders, a lot of amphibians are extremely in danger of losing their habitats. And I mentioned earlier sand pines in Florida. This is the Florida jay, and they live in those sand pines, and they are also threatened. And what makes this point about biodiversity hotspots very important is this. So in a light green area, this is the coastal plain, the biodiversity hotspots, and the yellow ones are where the wood pellet facilities exist, and then the red ones are being proposed. The brown circles show roughly where those facilities harvest the trees. And you see a lot of overlap between the harvesting areas and the biodiversity hotspot. So Enviva presents itself as this foremost forest conservationist, sustainable company, but investigations by environmental organizations like this map is from Southern Environmental Law Center. Other the organizations like Dogwood Alliance, North Carolina Forest Conservation Network, Southern Forest Conservation Networks, those organizations have shown that the company is responsible for the deforestation of about 60,000 acres per year in this region. So, so this is one of the a picture aerial view of logs at the Enviva wood pellet factory. And this is from 2021, so it's a couple years old. But you can see a lot of whole trees being harvested. And this is my last slide. I just want to end by saying that in beavers and wood pellet industries in general, the sustainability, these frames of renewable and carbon neutral, the forest conservation and community building, these are the frames that they use, and they have a lot of course, financial resources to promote those frames, but they leave out many shadow places. And so that the title of my presentation today was Renewable for Whom? And from, this is the question that I think we need to keep asking, because it is not renewable. It may, it may create profits for the companies and industry and for the countries, and then there may be some benefits, but in a larger scheme of things, nothing is renewable about wood pellet industry. So on the paper, a country may reduce emissions by taking advantage of the accounting loophole. But what is the accounting for from the point of view of the earth as a whole? Anishinaabe leader Winona LaDuke reminds us that we can create our own rules apart from how the rest of the earth functions, but in the final analysis, natural law does not change. We may reduce emissions on paper, but it will not follow natural laws. So I'm still sort of working on developing eco-justice within this particular wood pellet issues, but as a scholar, a scholar activist, what I really am trying to do is to communicate the fundamental importance of eco-justice approach to sustainability, where in thinking about what's sustainable, you have to think about, is this just for the community? And by community, that includes not only human communities, but the larger ecosystems that exist in Earth as a whole. So in the words of Haraway, the entanglement of life needs to be accounted for. So I'm gonna just leave with this.
Thank you so much. This is super fascinating. I've got gobs of questions, and I suspect that other people do too. So I'll let everybody else have their crack first. Who would like to ask any questions to Dr. Kinapuchi? Alan, go ahead.
First, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really informative and terrific. The basic question I have is, it's really hard to wrap one's head around the IPCC loophole. I take what you said about why it was devised, but has there been any significant pushback against it to date? Thank you.
As far as I know, it has not been revised. However, IPCC does not say that this the policy regarding double counting, prohibition of double counting, it doesn't. IPCC is very clear that it doesn't mean that woody biomass is carbon neutral. In fact, it doesn't talk anything about wood pellet industry. However, the industry interpreted to benefit their practices, and so but there's as far as I know, there's no amendment to the IPCC clear, stating that that this stating the change that you're asking about. And it's a shame. It's a shame that, you know, that
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So it was just really interesting to see all the language that they use that makes this very misleading. And I was just wondering, like, if you have any tips or what's your advice to kind of be able to pick out this misleading language that, you know, makes something on the surface seem like it's sustainable, but it's actually not, or does it just require like digging and researching on your own to be able to kind of see through this?
That's a really good question. I think for me, the I am already suspicious every time when I go into the industry speaking about sustainability and using all the images I used, they in my slides, they come from Enviva's communication too. And when I'm already suspicious, so I don't know if people randomly going into their websites see it that way. But I have this issue of wood pellets, although North Carolina is ground zero, that it's happening in the eastern North Carolina. So where I live in Greensboro in the Triad area, most people don't know anything about it. And so when they go into look at these companies, and students even mentioned that they talk about it. Oh, this sounds like a great company, and so they have this massive public relations money to create very convincing messages. And so Sarah, I think you will have to dig into it, but I don't think it's difficult. It's difficult because these days, I remember days when we didn't have Google. So, but these days, even with a very quick research, like every time when an industry says we are sustainable, I think it serves well to look at that with critical eyes and see what other informations are out there. And I think we can begin to find information that is consistent or inconsistent quickly.
Thank you so much.
Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about the protests. Oh, first of all, thank you for your talk. I really loved it. And you talked a little bit about the protesters and the response from the company that this is all within state regulations. So what other sorts of actions have you come across in your research in addition to the protests? Has there been any sorts of press for legislation or pushback against the company or?
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that question. Some of the things that's been happening is that because those land from which the wood are sourced from are privately owned, there are very few actions that people can take. And one is that, of course, the tighter enforcement of Clean Air Act at the local level. And because the Enviva wasn't installing the filters to filter out a lot of particulates that are dangerous to people. And of course the state failed to enforce that. And so the organizations like Southern Environmental Law Center, they have filed lawsuit and pushed the state to regulate and enforce, and push the company to install those filters. The filters are expensive. That's why they didn't install them. And it costs millions. But so these actions have been taken to reduce air pollution a little bit, but it doesn't address the dust, which is causing a lot of respiratory problems. And the people in environmental organizations are also doing a lot of education about that. And for example, they have done, I wish I could show maybe the one of the ports where those wood pellets been exported from is Wilmington. So the coast of Wilmington, you see huge facilities of Enviva storing the wood pellets, and you see this huge, humongous ship that's taking, and that's another thing too, that the industry does not address the greenhouse gases that coming from transportation and things like that. But so the people who are against this wood pellet industry, they have been doing educational events, like taking people on the boat trip to show the decimated areas from this industry and these massive facilities that are created at the port of Wilmington. And so, and they are doing community organizing and things like that. But this, that's something I know. Some people have become, of course, stock holders, and they attend meetings and they monitor the stocks, because that's another thing. You know, you have to keep, if you are protesting or opposing this, you have to keep messaging out about unsustainability of that, and then at the same time you pressure the investors to not invest in the industry. So I think they are doing the best they can in different ways, the means that are available.
Itsuka, I was wondering if I could exercise my moderator's prerogative and ask a question. You know, I mean, this is so interesting, that, you know, this turn to biomass is, you know, in some ways kind of a return, you know, to older energy forms. But I'm interested in the kind of where you ended up, you know, quoting Winona Duke, thinking about eco-justice. And I'm just thinking about the way that in so many areas of the country where extractive practices are kind of predicated on a continuation of settler colonial invasions of various kinds, you know, whether it's nuclear waste being dumped near reservation land or pipelines crossing reservations. And it just seems to me that, like, this woody biomass is telling a different story, historically speaking. You know, I'm so struck by the maps that all this is taking place in that, you know, area of the nation that is, you know, essentially devoid now of indigenous presence because of the long history of Indian removal. And so I'm wondering if you're thinking along those lines in terms of like a kind of larger historical story, and if you can sort of speak to that a little bit, because it's so interesting that this is all private land now, but it's like private land now because, you know, in 1830 we forcibly removed them all to the west. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to all that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I haven't really thought that far, but I do know that so that's an interesting thing that I should look into. I do know that some of the people who own this land now, African Americans too, and many of them have moved to north so they don't necessarily live down there. And so because of that was because of the migration, the great migration that happened towards north. And so that they don't necessarily have connection to those land anymore. So they don't really care what happens. But the of course this overlap with the already marginalized communities from petrochemical industries and plastic factories and all other things. And so this is sort of another layer that's being added to environmental injustice in the area. But I think you make a really great point about going even farther back and looking at how those the land was taken from the original inhabitants. So that's that's something that I need to look into.
If I can just add one thing, I love the way you're thinking about this too. And I mean, it reminds me that I was thinking about Indian removal, but there's also a story about slavery here too. And that it's a kind of I wrote in the chat, it's a kind of Plantationocene narrative, to use another one of Haraway's terms. This is really interesting. Thank you. Go ahead, Alan.
I just wanted to maybe throw this out. If I'm not mistaken, North Carolina used to support a very robust furniture industry that has been sort of driven into the ground. Is this a way for the state to sort of, circle back and make use of trees in this way, and that they're no longer making as much furniture as in the past?
That is a great question that I don't have an answer to, Alan. But that I'm going to make a note. But yeah, so I don't know. But I don't know about the connection to the decline of the furniture industry, but I have to say that North Carolina was also big in tobacco, and that industry has gone down. And so in terms of replacing the industry, I can see how this is kind of playing a role there. And also, in the eastern North Carolina is really suffering in terms of many of those environmental injustices. Of course, we have one of the largest hog industries and the chicken, and so the communities around those facilities have been. I have gone there, and then the smell and the air and the soil pollution coming out of those K4s is incredible. And so there have been a lot of protests against that too. And so I think that industry is shrinking a little bit too. And so I think that as a state level, they need some economic the industry that thrives in place of declining industries. So I think there are a lot of parts that are out there that need to be considered.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Go ahead, Lily.
Can I ask a super ignorant question? I was struck, Etsuko, about what you said in regard to consumers deliberately being invited not to think of where the commodities, whatever it is that we're consuming by way of energy is coming from. But what is the form of the final product, and where is it used, and who consume it?
With regard to pellets?
Yes. Is it for
These are
wood burning stove, for example?
they are using for heat, but also electricity generation.
Ah,
So a lot of places are using, I failed to mention it, but now that the coals are being, criticized, right? It's like because it's producing so much greenhouse gases. And so the power companies like Drax, that's the largest UK power company, they are using coal firing plants to burn with pellets now. And so so that they can use still those facilities, and then they are producing renewable energy. So it looks like a great solution to, moving away from fossil fuel. But of course it's done, it's producing greenhouse gases there in burning, but also it's done at the expense of deforestation elsewhere.
While we're asking like practical questions that we don't necessarily know things about, that there's some things I'm curious about there too. Like, I assume, so I guess a two-part question. I mean, my understanding is those pellets are like compressed, right? Like so question one is like, is that an energy intensive process? Is that a carbon intensive process to produce those in the first place? And then I'm guessing, again, I'm speculating here, like the output, I would think like the mass of a ton of biomass pellets in terms of like, the amount of energy that comes out of that is nowhere even close to equivalent to a ton of coal or something, right? The pellets themselves are probably not very energy rich compared to hydrocarbons. Is that?
Yes,
or,
that's what
the answer
the
to those two
studies.
things?
That's what the studies show, that
Yeah.
it's not an efficient energy source.
Yeah.
And it does use, when they compress, my understanding is that, of course, I'm not a chemist, right? So, but my understanding that is that you have to use harmful chemicals to make pellets, and it's very energy intensive also. But all these factors, the industry claims that even counting those things, it's still renewable. But I think there are a lot of enough peer-reviewed sources, and so the research that's done by other organizations that say otherwise. And so, but it looks good, like you said before. It's like, it sounds like we're going back to the old ways. And I think, the burning wood here and there to heat your homes, maybe that's fine, but when it's done in an industrial level, it's not a sustainable practice.
Other
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, and the language they use when they call certain trees as trash trees, it's just takes my breath away.
I like the one part where that quote, it says that when harvest occurs, as if harvest is a natural process itself, as if nobody's doing that harvesting. It just sort of happens sometimes.
Yeah. It's, I think that from a holistic point of view, it's like forests, they're not just the provide wood, but of course forests are homes to many creatures. They hold the soil integrity, the health of the ground, the water, and so all these the service that the trees are doing in a natural forest are not accounted for when we think of wood pellets as sustainable energy source. And so I'm very concerned right now because I'm from Japan, and Japan is increasing. They just made a deal last year with Enviva. They are going to they have the plan to really increase the the wood pellet purchase from southeastern United States. And so, you know, Japan has been struggling energy-wise because nuclear has not grown very much. It continuously being protested, and they have all kinds of problems with the meeting the new strict guidelines for the safety operation. And so now they want to use wood pellets, and that's a problem. And I told my parents about my mom about that, and she's like, Japan has so many trees. Why don't they just burn trees from Japan? And so she's just completely missing the point. But yeah, I think some organizations there are trying to organize and educate folks about the negative consequences of that too. But
And speaking, go ahead, no, Alan.
Well, thank you, Lily. I just wanted to ask, when you talked about in the UK using coal-fired power plants to now use wood pellets, does the industry refer to wood pellets as a kind of transition fuel, as the natural gas industry does for natural gas, saying that this is just a temporary measure until we can fully go online with more legitimate forms of renewable energy? Or am I just imagining that this is a possibility of a future campaign?
I have not seen them particularly referring to it as a transition. I think they are defining wood pellets as one of the most promising renewable energy, like, because solar and wind are not as reliable, but wood pellets are. I think that's the language I've been hearing.
Oh, that's very scary. Thank you.
It's so, sorry, can I make this is not so much a question as a statement, I guess, but I'm just thinking about this. I mean, there's such a disconnect, between their kind of green rhetoric and the imperatives of capitalism that are clearly driving their business model, because it is the case, right? That if the energy future, it is going to require a kind of diverse mix of sources. And on some level, biomass could actually make a kind of sense. But like the deals with, Japan are a pretty good indication that they're not thinking about a sustainable energy regime that they supply, a portion of. What they're just thinking about scale, right? They just want to, that's just more capitalist growth and expansion and accumulation and expropriation. And which is, I think, the thing that's sort of strikes me as like fundamentally discordant about the way they talk and then the way they conduct their business. They don't want to be a little local operation that's, helping to heat some homes and alleviate the use of coal and gas. They want to grow and expand. And that is clearly, as you are showing, in no way sustainable at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is the problem. I completely agree with Lily, when the trash trees and trash wood and that type of thing, and also like low value wood, that language is problematic. But if you're using the understay or understories or the branches and so forth, that makes sense still. But when it comes to but that's not what they're doing. In order to meet the growing market, or in order to grow the market, you have to clear cut entire forests everywhere in a massive scale. And that's the problem. And I only mentioned the Southeastern United States, but that's happening also in the European countries too. In the old growth forests are being cut, like in Slovenia and illegal loggings are happening for this purpose. And in Vietnam, the old growth forests are being threatened by the wood pellet industry. So it's happening in a global scale. So
yeah, and I was going to say that if we're talking about the politics of discourse, what is never, what is unspeakable, what is unsayable in our mainstream culture is, can we pull back, right? Can we scale back the way we live civilizationally so that other beings can have a chance at thriving or even surviving, right? That is always never imaginable. For us, our way of life is non-negotiable. And so
Right.
whatever it takes, yeah.
So I think I know, Lily, you're deep into indigenous epistemologies, and but I think for that reason, it's very important for us to, as one of the things we could do, is to help indigenous movement, and
to
so
learn to live indigenously ourselves, to relearn, right?
Yeah. We have in North Carolina, we have a very conservative General Assembly right now, but we do have some good ones. One of them is Pricey Harrison, and she sponsored Rights of Nature bill, and it's not going anywhere right now, but it's out there, and that's specifically related to How River. The river How River starts north of Greensboro, where I live, and How River feeds into Cape Fear River. That's the longest river in North Carolina. And so I'm working with an indigenous organization here called 7 Directions of Service. And that's Okanichi Band. The leadership is from the Saponi Nation, Okanichi Band. And so I'm working, I'm supporting the organization to bring the resolution to, to the city of Greensboro. So I think, of course, it's a long shot, but I think it's the culture change that needs to happen to think and recognize that beyond there is this amazing life forms outside humans, and they have as much right to be on this planet, and we can't live without other species. But they can live without us. So I think we have to support those initiatives where we can. And
I wonder, if as we're getting down to the end here, if I can ask you a different sort of question to draw on your expertise and experience. This group is involved in various initiatives related to sustainability on campus, and you were the academic sustainability coordinator there, and you've done this work with ASHE, and so I'm sure there are things we could learn from you. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about sustainability efforts on your campus that might be lessons that could be valuable for us, or if you have any advice or tips or I don't know, stories that might be of help as we try to build a more sustainable campus here at Oakland.
That's a broad question, so I'm not sure if I can answer effectively here. But so when I was an academic sustainability coordinator, my charge was to advocate for sustainability being part of the academic curriculum. And so there are a lot of faculty members that are interested, and so we have a list of courses that offer components or the entire class course dedicated to sustainability. And we do define sustainability here on our campus as the interconnection of environmental health and the health of the environment, the social equity, economic aspect, and also aesthetics. By aesthetics, we mean the values we have. And so that's the kind of framework that we use. But on the other hand, we do what we can, right? Like we create events and draw in community members. And so even with low budget or no budget, we try to do what we can to continue and grow the community. One thing we do have, I don't know if you have it, but we have a listserv, sustainability listserv that was started on our campus, but then it includes the community, and so we announce any events that's coming up or whatever. So we have like 600 members, or 600 people subscribing to the listserv, and so I think that has been a useful tool.
Thank you. I bet we could squeeze in one more question if someone has one. We're really grateful for your time and don't want to keep you too long, but anybody have a last question for Dr. Kinafuchi?
I could
Well,
just
in that case, go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much, Etsuko. This was really interesting. I knew very little about the wood pellet industry. And, I have to say, I'm not surprised, that there's so much behind this that really is completely unsustainable and non-renewable and polluting and extractive. But it's worse than I imagined it was. So thank you, really, for illuminating this, I think, very important issue that we all should know about. And I'm going to be sharing this information with people that I know.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Michelle. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was going to say Dogwood Alliance is a great resource for learning more about it. I can put that in the chat.
And while you're doing that, then I'll just call for another show of appreciation for a terrific presentation and enlightening conversation. Thank you so much. This has been great. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you,
so
Lily, for
much.
bringing your amazing friend here. It really is a great talk.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Etsuko.
Thank you, Etsuko.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. Thank you so much.